I've been a park ranger at Mount Hollow National Forest for 3 years now. When people ask me about my job, they expect stories about bear encounters or helping lost hikers find their way back to the trailhead. What they don't expect, what I can never really tell them, is that some of us rangers have a completely different set of responsibilities. Responsibilities that have nothing to do with wildlife management or trail maintenance. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm writing this because I need someone to know the truth. If something happens to me, if I become another statistic in the growing list of park employee disappearances, then at least there will be a record. At least someone will understand why. It started on my first day, 3 years ago, in late September. The aspens were turning gold, and the air had that crisp quality that makes you feel alive just breathing it in. I reported to the ranger station at 6 in the morning, excited and nervous in equal measure. This was my dream job, managing a sector of one of the most beautiful forests in the Pacific Northwest. My supervisor was Tom Garrett, a weathered man in his late 50s, with the kind of face that suggested he'd seen more than he wanted to talk about. He ran through the standard orientation, radio protocols, emergency procedures, wildlife safety, everything I'd learned in training. But then, as we were finishing up, he pulled out a plain manila folder from his desk drawer. "There's something else," he said, his voice dropping lower, "something that's not in any manual or training program." He slid the folder across the desk to me. Inside were several typed pages, yellowed with age, as if they'd been photocopied and recopied over decades. At the top of the first page, in bold letters, "Operational Guidelines for Sector 7 Rangers." "Read these carefully," Tom said. "Memorize them. Don't write them down anywhere else, and don't discuss them with anyone outside this station. Not your family, not your friends, and especially not the visitors." I must have looked confused because he continued, "Sarah, Mount Hollow isn't like other parks. There are things here that don't make sense. Things that can't be explained. These rules exist because rangers before us learned the hard way what happens when you don't follow them." My hand trembled slightly as I picked up the pages. There were 15 rules in total, each more bizarre than the last. I'll share them with you now, exactly as they were written. Rule 1. If you encounter a trail that isn't on any of your maps, do not explore it. Mark the location, report it immediately, and keep all visitors away from the area. These trails appear and disappear without warning. They lead somewhere, but nowhere you want to go. Rule 2. Between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., stay inside the ranger station or your vehicle with all doors locked. Do not respond to voices calling your name during these hours, even if you recognize them. Especially if you recognize them. Rule 3. If you find a campsite with all the supplies present but no people, do not touch anything. Radio it in using code Silver, evacuate the immediate area, and establish a quarter-mile perimeter. Wait for the senior ranger to arrive before taking any further action. Rule 4. Never follow the lights in the forest after dark. They will appear as flashlights or headlamps in the distance, sometimes moving in patterns that suggest someone needs help. They are not flashlights. They are not people who need help. Rule 5. If you encounter a hiker who seems disoriented and claims they've been on the trail for far longer than possible, do not argue with them about the timeline.
Escort them out of the park immediately. Do not ask them detailed questions about where they've been. File a Code Gray report. Rule 6. Certain areas of Sector 7 are marked with small red markers on the trees, 3 vertical lines.
These boundaries must never be crossed, even in an emergency. If a visitor crosses them, do not follow. Report it as Code Black. Rule 7. If you hear singing coming from the old ranger station ruins near Fletcher's Peak, leave the area immediately. Do not try to identify the song or locate the source. The old station has been abandoned for 40 years. No one should be there. Rule 8. Animal behavior in this forest can be unusual. If you see deer, elk, or any other wildlife moving in perfect synchronization, as if choreographed, do not watch them. Turn away and leave the area quickly but calmly. Rule 9. Missing persons reports in Sector 7 are handled differently than in other parks. If someone is reported missing, you may be instructed to stop searching after only a few hours. Follow these instructions exactly, no matter how wrong it feels. Rule 10. If you find personal belongings arranged in a circle or specific pattern, particularly shoes or cameras, photograph them, but do not disturb the arrangement. Mark the GPS coordinates and report as Code Red. Rule 11. Some visitors will ask very specific questions about the Watchers, or the Tall Ones, or the people who don't blink. Deny any knowledge of what they're referring to. Log their names and campsite locations and monitor their movements closely. Rule 12. If your radio picks up transmissions that sound like ranger communications but use call signs you don't recognize, do not respond. These broadcasts often contain instructions or requests for assistance. Ignore them completely. Rule 13. The screaming in the forest is not what you think it is. Mountain lions and foxes can make terrible sounds, yes, but you'll know the difference when you hear it. When you hear the screaming that doesn't sound quite right, radio your position and return to the station immediately. 14. If you see what appears to be another ranger in the distance, but they're not responding to radio calls, do not approach them. Watch them carefully. If their movements seem off, too smooth, too fast, or they're in an impossible location, report Code Orange and evacuate to the nearest road. Rule 15. Keep account of how many visitors you encounter on patrol each day. If you count the same person multiple times in different locations more than an hour apart, approach them and verify their identification. Sometimes what looks like the same person isn't. I read through the list 3 times, my heart pounding harder with each pass. When I looked up, Tom was watching me carefully. "Is this some kind of hazing ritual?" I asked, trying to laugh but failing. "I wish it was," he said. "Give it a month. You'll understand why these rules exist." I wanted to press him for details, to demand explanations, but something in his expression stopped me. He looked tired, worn down by something more than just years of park service. "One more thing," he added as I stood to leave. "These rules were written in blood, Sarah. Each one exists because something terrible happened. Follow them exactly, and you'll be fine. Break them and—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Just don't break them." For the first 2 weeks, everything seemed normal. I spent my days checking permits, maintaining trails, and helping tourists with directions. The rules sat in the back of my mind like a bizarre joke, something I'd eventually laugh about with other rangers. Then came October 14th. I'll never forget that date. I was on afternoon patrol in the northern section of Sector 7, a relatively quiet area with a few popular day hiking trails. The weather was perfect, sunny but cool, with that golden autumn light filtering through the pines. I'd checked in with 3 different hiking groups and was making my way back to my truck when I noticed something odd. There was a trail branching off from the main path, not a social trail worn down by off-route hikers, but a proper trail with what looked like official markers. I pulled out my map, studying it carefully. This trail wasn't marked. It didn't exist on any of my documentation. Rule 1 echoed in my mind. If you encounter a trail that isn't on any of your maps, do not explore it. I felt a strange pull, an almost physical urge to follow the trail. It looked so inviting, so well maintained. The logical part of my brain argued that it must be a new trail that hadn't made it onto the maps yet, or perhaps an old trail that had been forgotten. But I remembered Tom's words. These rules were written in blood. I marked the location on my GPS, took several photos, and hiked back to my truck. When I radioed it in, there was a long pause before Tom responded. "You found one," he said, his voice tight. "Did you follow it?" "No, I marked it and left." Another pause. "Good. Put up temporary closure signs around the area. I'll be there in an hour with the senior team." Tom arrived with 2 other rangers I'd never met before, Marie and Jackson. They were both older. Both had the same haunted look in their eyes that Tom sometimes got. We hiked back to the location together, and I watched as they photographed everything methodically, speaking in low voices and consulting what looked like historical maps. "This is the 4th one this year," Marie said to Tom, as if I wasn't there. "They're appearing more frequently." "I know," Tom replied. I couldn't help myself. "Where do they go?" The 3 of them looked at me, and Marie smiled sadly. "We don't know. Every ranger who's tried to find out didn't come back." "What do you mean, didn't come back?" I asked. Jackson answered this time, his voice rough. 23 years ago, a ranger named David Mills decided the rules were nonsense. He followed one of these trails to prove there was nothing strange about them. He paused. We found his truck 3 days later. His radio was inside, along with his ranger gear, but David was gone. "Did you search for him?" "For 2 weeks, Tom said. "We brought in search and rescue teams from 3 states. Dogs, helicopters, everything. No trace. But on the 14th day of searching, his body appeared right where the trail had been. Except what?" I pressed. Tom's face went pale. The trail was gone, like it had never existed. And David, the coroner, couldn't determine how long he'd been dead. His body showed signs of advanced decomposition, as if he'd been out there for months. But we'd searched that exact spot multiple times. He hadn't been there. I felt cold despite the afternoon sun. "So, these trails are doors," Marie finished. "Or maybe portals is a better word. To where? We don't know. But nothing good is on the other side." We closed off the area with temporary fencing and official closure signs. I checked on it daily for the next week, and then one morning, the trail was simply gone. Not overgrown, not blocked, gone, as if it had never existed. The forest floor where it had been was covered in undisturbed pine needles and vegetation. That incident changed something in me. The rules weren't a joke anymore. They were survival instructions. A month later, I had my first experience with Rule 3.
I was doing an early morning patrol when I came across a campsite in a small clearing off Trail 7. It was a nice setup, expensive tent, cooking gear neatly arranged, backpacks propped against a tree. A campfire had burned down to cold ashes, suggesting whoever had camped here had left in the morning. Except something was wrong. The sleeping bags were still laid out in the tent, unzipped, as if someone had just gotten up. Personal items were scattered around: phones, wallets, car keys. A pot of what looked like oatmeal sat on the camp stove, half-eaten and growing a skin of mold. This was a Code Silver situation. All supplies present, no people. My hands shook as I radioed it in. "Base, this is Ranger Chen. I have a Code Silver at coordinates." I read off the GPS location. Tom's response was immediate. "Do not touch anything. Establish a perimeter and wait for me." I backed away from the campsite, marking it with tape and signs to keep any passing hikers away. Tom arrived 40 minutes later with Marie. They both wore serious expressions as they photographed everything, documenting every item in the camp. "How long do you think they've been gone?" I asked. Tom checked the mold growth on the oatmeal. 3 days, maybe 4. "Shouldn't we search for them?" Marie shook her head. "This is our 3rd Code Silver this season. We search because we have to, because families demand it. But Sarah, we don't find people in Code Silver situations. We find their camps, perfectly preserved, and nothing else. What happens to them?" "If we knew that," Tom said quietly, "maybe we could stop it from happening." They filed the report, and a search was organized. For 3 days, teams combed the forest around that campsite. They found nothing. No tracks, no trace of the missing couple, nothing to suggest where they'd gone. The search was called off on the 4th day, much faster than usual, as if everyone involved knew it was pointless. The couple's names were Mark and Jennifer Hamilton from Seattle. They'd checked in at the visitor center 4 days before I found their camp, saying they planned to spend 3 nights in the backcountry. They'd seemed happy, excited for their trip. They were never seen again. Their car sat in the parking lot for 2 weeks before their families claimed it. I drove past it every day, and each time I felt a sick weight in my stomach. Those people had come here for beauty and adventure, and instead they'd found what? What had happened to them? I started having nightmares. In them, I would find the Hamiltons' campsite again, but this time I would touch something, pick up a phone or step inside the tent. The moment I did, the forest would change.
The trees would grow darker, closer together, and I would realize I was no longer in the same forest. Something would be watching me from between the trees, something tall and wrong, and I would wake up gasping. December brought snow and fewer visitors, but the strangeness didn't stop. If anything, it intensified. I had my first experience with Rule 2 on a cold night in mid-December. I was manning the ranger station overnight, catching up on paperwork while monitoring the emergency radio. The station was warm and well lit, a small bubble of normalcy in the vast darkness of the forest. At 2:15 a.m., I heard it. My name, called from somewhere outside. "Sarah! Sarah Chen!" The voice was familiar. It sounded exactly like my sister Melissa. My heart jumped. Melissa lived 3 states away and had never visited me at work. There was no reason she would be here, especially not in the middle of the night in winter. I stood up, walking toward the door instinctively. My hand was on the doorknob when I remembered.
Rule 2. Between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., stay inside with all doors locked. Do not respond to voices calling your name, even if you recognize them. I yanked my hand back, as if the doorknob had burned me. "Sarah, please!" The voice was desperate now, pleading. "I need help. I'm lost." Every instinct screamed at me to open the door. It sounded so much like my sister. What if she really was out there? What if she'd driven up to surprise me and gotten lost in the forest? But I knew better now. I'd learned. I backed away from the door, my heart hammering. "Sarah!" The voice was right outside now, pressed against the door. "Why won't you help me? Please, I'm scared." I sat down at my desk, forcing myself to focus on my paperwork, trying to block out the sounds. The voice continued for 45 minutes, sometimes pleading, sometimes screaming, sometimes sobbing. It was torture listening to what sounded like my sister in distress and doing nothing.
At exactly 4 a.m., the voice stopped mid-sentence. The sudden silence was almost worse than the noise had been. I waited another 15 minutes before I dared to look out the window. The forest was empty and still, the snow undisturbed around the station. Whatever had been out there hadn't left any tracks. I called my sister the next morning, needing to hear her real voice. She was fine, safe at home, confused about why I was checking on her. I didn't explain. That same week, I had to use Rule 14. I was on patrol near the eastern boundary of Sector 7 when I spotted another ranger in the distance. They were standing perfectly still, about 200 yards away, facing away from me. I could see the characteristic brown and green uniform, the wide-brimmed hat. I grabbed my radio. "Base, this is Chem. Who else is on patrol in Section E7 today?" "Just you, Sarah," came the response. "Why?" I watched the figure in the distance. It hadn't moved at all, not even the slight shifts of weight that a real person would make while standing. "I have a visual on what appears to be another ranger," I said carefully. "They're not responding to radio calls." There was a pause. "What's their behavior?" I studied the figure more carefully. Something about it was wrong. The proportions weren't quite right. It was too tall, too thin. And now that I was really looking, I realized it was standing in a position that should have been impossible. There was a steep drop-off where it stood, a cliff face. No one could stand there. "Code Orange," I said into my radio, my mouth dry, requesting permission to evacuate to the nearest road. "Granted, move quickly, but don't run." I turned and walked back the way I'd come, fighting every urge to look over my shoulder. I didn't see if the figure moved or followed. I didn't want to know. When I reached my truck and looked back, the figure was gone. Tom drove out to meet me, and we filled out the Code Orange report together.
He didn't seem surprised. "They appear more often in winter," he said. "We think it has something to do with fewer visitors. Like they're searching for something, testing boundaries." "What are they?" I finally asked the question that had been building for months. Tom was quiet for a long moment. "Honestly, we don't know. People call them different things. The Watchers, the tall ones, the Rangers that aren't. What we do know is that they wear our shapes like disguises. They study us, and sometimes, if you get too close or acknowledge them directly, they follow you." "Follow you where?" "Home," he said simply. "To your house, your family. There was a ranger 15 years ago who broke Code Orange protocol. He approached one of them, tried to talk to it. For the next 3 months,
He reported seeing it everywhere. Outside his bedroom window, in his backyard, standing in his driveway when he left for work. It never did anything, just watched. He eventually quit and moved to Florida. Last I heard, he still sees it sometimes. I slept with my curtains closed that night and for many nights after. January brought my first encounter with Rule 4, the lights in the forest. I was driving back to the station after a late patrol when I saw them through the trees. Lights moving in the distance, bobbing along in a pattern consistent with people hiking with flashlights. But it was nearly midnight, below freezing, and no one had permits for overnight camping in that area. I stopped my truck, watching the lights. There were 3 of them, moving in a strange, synchronized pattern. They would pause together, move together, spread apart, and come back together. It almost looked like a dance. Something in my lizard brain screamed at me to investigate. It looked so much like people who might need help. What if they were lost hikers? What if someone was injured? But Rule 4 was clear. Never follow the lights in the forest after dark. I grabbed my radio.
Base, I have visual on 3 unidentified lights in Sector 7, Grid F4. No permits for that area. Roger that, came Tom's voice. He sounded tired. Are they moving toward you? No, moving parallel to my position. Do not investigate. Return to station. I put the truck in gear and started driving, but I couldn't help watching the lights in my rearview mirror. As I pulled away, they changed direction. All 3 lights turned and began moving toward where I'd been parked, as if they knew exactly where I was. I drove faster. The next morning, Tom and I hiked out to where I'd seen the lights. We found tracks in the snow, but they weren't from boots or shoes. They were perfectly round impressions, each exactly the same size and depth, spaced too far apart for normal human strides. They continued for about a quarter mile and then simply stopped, as if whatever made them had lifted off the ground and flown away. What made those? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Tom shook his head. Every time we follow up on the lights, we find tracks like these. Sometimes circular, sometimes triangular. Once they were hourglass-shaped, never human. We stopped trying to figure it out years ago. As winter turned to spring, I settled into my role. I learned to recognize the signs of trouble, to trust my instincts when something felt wrong. I followed the rules religiously, and I stayed safe. But not everyone did. In April, we got a new ranger, a young guy fresh out of training named Kyle Morrison. He was enthusiastic, confident, maybe a little cocky. Tom gave him the same orientation he'd given me, showed him the rules, told him the stories. Kyle laughed. Come on, you don't actually believe this stuff, do you? Tom's face hardened. I believe in keeping my rangers alive. These are just stories to scare new people, Kyle insisted. I've worked in remote areas before. I know what real dangers look like. Bears, hypothermia, getting lost, not ghost stories. I tried to talk to him. Kyle, just follow the rules. It's not worth the risk. He waved me off. You've been out here too long, Sarah. You're starting to see things that aren't there. 3 weeks later, Kyle volunteered for overnight patrol in the northern sector. It was a quiet night, nothing unusual reported. At 2:30 a.m., his radio crackled to life. Base, this is Morrison. I need assistance at my location. I've found some injured hikers. Tom, who was manning the night shift, responded immediately. Morrison, what's your location? I don't show any active permits in your sector. I'm about a mile north of Black Creek Falls. There are 3 people here. They're hypothermic and disoriented. I'm bringing them back to my truck to warm up. Kyle, stay in your vehicle. Tom said, his voice sharp with urgency. "Lock your doors. Do not open them." "What? That doesn't make any sense. These people need help." "Kyle, listen to me very carefully. What time is it?" There was a pause. "It's 2:30 a.m. Rule 2. Do not respond to voices calling for help between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. Those aren't real hikers." Kyle's laugh came through the radio, but it sounded uncertain now. "Tom, I can see them. They're right outside my truck. They look cold and—" "Do not open your door. One of them is knocking on my window. She says her daughter is hurt. I can see a little girl with her. Tom, there's a child." I had rushed to the station when Tom called me. We were both listening now, helpless, as Kyle struggled with the most fundamental human instinct to help someone in need. "Kyle, that's not a real child," Tom said, his voice shaking. "Do not open your door. Whatever you're seeing isn't real." "But she's crying. The little girl is crying and holding her arm like it's broken. How can this not be real? I'm looking right at them." "Kyle, I'm begging you. Stay in your vehicle. I'm sending help. They'll be there in 40 minutes. Just wait."
The silence stretched out. We could hear breathing over the radio, heavy and fast. Then, "I can't just sit here and watch a child suffer. I'm sorry, Tom. I'm opening the door." "Kyle, don't!" The radio went dead. We found his truck at dawn. The door was standing open, engine still running, heater blasting warm air into the empty cab. Kyle's Ranger gear was neatly folded on the passenger seat. His radio, his flashlight, his jacket with his name tag still pinned to it. His wallet was there too, and his phone, fully charged. Kyle Morrison was gone. The official search lasted 6 days. Park Services brought in teams from 4 states, the same as they'd done for David Mills decades ago. We searched hundreds of square miles. I was part of that search team, and I'll never forget the feeling of walking through those woods, calling Kyle's name, knowing we wouldn't find him. On the 7th day, Tom called off the search. The decision came from higher up, way higher up than Park Administration. I never learned exactly who made that call. Kyle's parents came to collect his vehicle. I had to stand there while his mother sobbed, asking me what happened, how we could just stop looking for her son. I had no answers I could give her, nothing that would make sense or provide comfort. The official report listed him as lost in the wilderness, presumed dead due to environmental exposure. It was easier than trying to explain the truth. After Kyle, something changed in me. The fear became a constant companion, but so did determination. I wasn't going to let what happened to him happen to anyone else on my watch. Summer brought the busy season, and with it, new challenges. More visitors meant more opportunities for rules to be broken, more chances for the strange forces in Mount Hollow to claim victims. In June, I encountered my first case requiring Rule 5. A woman came stumbling out of the forest near the southern trailhead. She was middle-aged, wearing expensive hiking gear that looked new, but was filthy and torn. I was parked nearby and saw her emerge from the trees, moving with the uncertain gait of someone severely dehydrated. I rushed over with water and a first aid kit. "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need medical attention?" She looked at me with unfocused eyes. I need to find the ranger station. I need to report. How long was I out there?" "How long were you hiking?" 3 weeks, she said. "Maybe 4? I lost track. My food ran out days ago.
I've been walking and walking, but the trails keep changing. They're not where they should be." I checked my records. Her name was Patricia Wheeler, and according to our system, she'd checked in for a day hike 9 hours ago. "Miss Wheeler, according to our records, you entered the park this morning." She laughed, a brittle sound. "That's impossible. I've been out here for weeks. My family must be frantic. Has anyone reported me missing?" Rule 5 was clear. If you encounter a hiker who seems disoriented and claims they've been on the trail for far longer than possible, do not argue with them about the timeline. Escort them out immediately. "Let's get you checked out by medical personnel," I said, helping her to my truck. "We can sort out the details later." As I drove her to the ranger station, she kept talking, her words tumbling out in a confused stream. The trails kept moving. I'd be walking south, and then somehow I'd be going north. The sun would set and then rise again an hour later. Time didn't work right in there. And I kept seeing... "Seeing what?" I asked, though I probably shouldn't have. "People, but not people. They would walk past me on the trail, and their faces would be wrong. Their eyes were in the wrong places, or they had too many joints in their arms. Once I saw what looked like a family: mother, father, 2 kids.
But they were all exactly the same height, and they moved in perfect unison, like puppets being controlled by the same hand. I filed a Code Gray report when we reached the station. Patricia was taken to the hospital, where doctors found her severely dehydrated and malnourished, consistent with someone who'd been without food and water for several days, not 9 hours. Her cell phone was dead, but when they charged it, the date stamp on her last photo showed she'd taken it 3 weeks ago. The official explanation was that her phone's internal clock had malfunctioned. The medical evidence was attributed to a pre-existing condition that made her dehydrate rapidly. Patricia spent a week in psychiatric evaluation and was eventually released with a diagnosis of a dissociative episode. I know the truth, though. She'd spent weeks in that forest, in some version of it that exists alongside our own. Time moves differently there. Reality works by different rules. She was lucky to make it out at all. July brought another trail that wasn't on the maps. This time, Marie was with me when we found it. We were doing a joint patrol in the western sector when we noticed it. A well-maintained trail branching off from an official path, marked with fresh blazes. According to our maps, the area where this trail led was supposed to be impenetrable wilderness. "4th one this season," Marie said, pulling out her camera. "They're appearing more frequently every year." "Why?" I asked. "What's causing it?" She shook her head. "Tom has a theory, but it's pretty out there. After everything I've seen, I'm ready for out there." Marie sighed. "He thinks something is waking up, that there's something old in this forest, something that was here long before the park was established. The Native Americans who lived in this area before colonization had stories about these mountains. They said certain places were doorways, thin spots where our world touched something else." They had their own rules for surviving in the forest, passed down for generations. What happened to those rules? They were ignored, Marie said quietly. When the Park Service took over, they treated native warnings as superstitions. A lot of people died in the early years. Rangers, visitors, construction workers. It took time and tragedy for the Park Service to understand that the warnings were real. We marked the trail and reported it. It was gone within 3 days. But something was different this time. After that trail appeared, I started noticing more anomalies. Sections of forest that seemed darker than they should be, even in full daylight. Places where my radio would fill with static and my compass would spin wildly. Areas where the trees grew in impossible formations, their branches interweaving in patterns too perfect to be natural. And the sounds. God, the sounds. Rule 13 talks about the screaming in the forest, but it doesn't adequately describe what it actually sounds like. In August, I heard it for the first time. I was on evening patrol, making my way back to my truck as the sun set. The forest was quiet, too quiet. No birds singing, no insects buzzing, no small animals rustling in the underbrush. Just an oppressive, unnatural silence. Then I heard it, a scream echoing through the trees. It sounded human at first, the shriek of someone in terrible pain or fear. But as I listened, my body tensed with primal recognition that something was very wrong. The scream had harmonics that no human throat could produce. It oscillated in pitch impossibly, and underneath it was a sound like crackling ice or breaking glass. My hand went to my radio before I even consciously decided to move. Base, this is Chen. I'm hearing the screaming, requesting permission to return to station. Granted. Tom's voice came back immediately. Move quickly, don't look for the source. I walked fast, fighting the urge to run.
The screaming continued, seeming to come from all directions at once. Sometimes it sounded close, right behind me. Other times it echoed from far away. It never stopped, never paused for breath the way a real scream would. I made it to my truck and locked the doors, my hands shaking. The screaming continued for another 10 minutes before finally fading away. When I got back to the station, Tom was waiting with a shot of whiskey. "You okay?" he asked. I downed the whiskey. "What was that?" "We don't know. Some rangers think it's territorial, a warning to leave. Others think it's hunting behavior, trying to flush out prey. We've learned it's best not to speculate too much." "Has anyone ever tried to find what's making that sound?" Tom's face went dark. "Once. Ranger named Phillips about 10 years ago. He was former military, trained in survival and combat. Thought he could track down the source and finally get some answers. What happened? We found him 3 days later. He was alive, barely. Physically, he was fine. No injuries, no signs of exposure. But mentally, Tom paused. He never spoke again. Just stared straight ahead, eyes wide, occasionally whimpering. He's in a care facility now, been there for a decade. Whatever he saw broke something fundamental in his mind. September brought my encounter with Rule 11. A family came to the visitor center, parents and 2 teenagers. They seemed normal at first, asking about hiking trails and camping spots. But then the father pulled me aside. "We need to know about the Watchers," he said quietly. "The tall ones. My daughter saw them on our last visit, and they followed her. She says they show up at our house now. We need to know how to make them stop." My skin prickled. Rule 11 was explicit. If visitors ask specific questions about the Watchers or the Tall Ones, deny any knowledge and log their information. "I'm sorry, I don't know what you're referring to," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "What do these Watchers look like?" The father's face fell. "Please, you have to know. We've done research.
People talk about them online, in forums. They're real. They're here in this park. Our daughter won't sleep anymore. She sees them standing outside her bedroom window every night. I really can't help you with that, I said, feeling terrible. Have you spoken with a doctor? Sometimes... We're not crazy, the mother interrupted, overhearing us. We've all seen them. They're tall, too tall, and they don't move right. Their faces are wrong. I logged their names and campsite location as required, then watched them leave. The daughter looked back at me from the car, and I saw raw terror in her young face. It took everything in me not to break protocol and tell them what I knew. Tom called their information in to somewhere, he wouldn't tell me where. 2 days later, I saw the family packing up their campsite and leaving, 3 days earlier than they'd planned. They moved quickly, constantly looking over their shoulders at the forest. I never found out what happened to them. By October, I'd been at Mount Hollow for a full year. I'd followed every rule, survived every strange encounter. I thought I understood how things worked, how to stay safe. Then I broke Rule 10. I was on patrol in a remote section when I found them, personal belongings arranged in a perfect circle. Hiking boots, backpacks, cameras, phones, even clothing. I pulled out my camera, photographing everything as required. The circle was about 15 feet in diameter, each item placed with precise spacing. The belongings looked new, recently placed, but there was no sign of who had left them or why. As I documented the scene, something caught my eye. One of the cameras, a nice DSLR, had its lens cap off. The LCD screen was lit up, showing the last photo taken. I knew I shouldn't touch anything, but curiosity overwhelmed me. I leaned down for a closer look. The photo showed this exact spot, this exact circle of belongings. But in the image, someone was standing in the center of the circle, a person in hiking gear, facing away from the camera. Something about their posture was wrong, too stiff, too angular. I should have stopped there. I should have stepped back, called it in, and waited. But my finger reached out, almost without my conscious control, and pressed the button to scroll to the next photo. The same scene, but now the figure was facing the camera. It had no face. Where its features should have been was just smooth, blank skin. My hand jerked back, but I'd already touched the camera. I'd already broken the rule. For a moment, nothing happened. The forest was silent. Then I felt it. A presence behind me, so intense it was like physical pressure on my back. I didn't turn around. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my training held. I slowly straightened up, keeping my eyes on the ground, and backed away from the circle. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. The presence followed. I could feel it matching my movements, staying exactly the same distance behind me. I grabbed my radio with shaking hands. Base, code red. I have a code red situation. Need immediate extraction at my location. Sarah? Tom's voice was sharp with concern. What happened? I touched something in the circle. My voice came out as a whisper. It's here. It's behind me. Do not turn around. Do not acknowledge it. Walk to your vehicle. We're sending help. I walked. Each step felt like it took an hour. The presence stayed with me, silent but overwhelming. I could hear something now, breathing that didn't quite sound right, air moving through passages that weren't shaped like lungs. My truck was a 1/4 mile away.
I walked that distance in absolute terror, my eyes fixed straight ahead, my body rigid with the effort of not looking back.
Twice I heard footsteps that weren't mine, slightly out of sync with my own. Once I felt something brush against my hair, soft and cold. When I finally reached my truck, I climbed in and locked the doors with trembling hands. Only then did I look in my rearview mirror. It was standing 20 feet behind the truck, tall, impossibly tall, with proportions that hurt to look at. It wore the shape of a person the way a child might wear an adult's coat, badly, with the wrong dimensions showing through. Its face was smooth and blank, just like in the photo. It stood perfectly still, watching me with eyes it didn't have. Tom and Marie arrived 15 minutes later with 2 rangers I'd never seen before. They were older, veterans, and they moved with the calm of people who'd dealt with this before. One of them pulled out what looked like a road flare. "Watch carefully," Tom said to me through my truck window. "You need to see this." The ranger lit the flare and walked toward the figure. It didn't move as he approached. When he was about 10 feet away, he threw the flare at its feet. The moment the flare hit the ground, the figure jerked as if electrocuted. It bent backward at an impossible angle, and I heard that screaming sound again, the one from Rule 13, all wrong harmonics and broken glass. Then it simply folded in on itself, collapsing down and down until there was nothing left. The ranger kicked dirt over the still-burning flare, extinguishing it. "Magnesium," Marie explained, "intense light and heat. We don't know why it works, but it does. Each ranger carries emergency flares now for situations like this." Tom drove my truck back to the station while Marie drove me in the ranger vehicle. I couldn't stop shaking. "You got lucky," Marie said. "Most people who break Rule 10 don't get followed by just one. Usually it's 3 or 4, and they don't always leave after the flare trick." "What happens then?" She was quiet for a moment.
Then we lose another ranger. That night, I wrote my resignation letter. I had it printed out, signed, ready to submit in the morning. I'd lasted a year, which was longer than most new rangers in Sector 7. It was time to go, to find a normal job in a normal place where the rules made sense and the forest didn't watch you back. But when I arrived at work, Tom was waiting with news that changed everything. "Sarah, I need you to take lead on training the new ranger," he said. "He starts today." "Tom, I'm putting in my resignation." He looked at my letter but didn't take it. "Please, just meet him first. Show him the ropes for 1 week. Then if you still want to quit, I won't stop you." The new ranger's name was Marcus Webb. He was in his early 30s, former search and rescue, with an easy smile and confident demeanor. He reminded me of Kyle, and that made my stomach twist with anxiety. "So, what's the real story here?" Marcus asked after Tom left us alone. "I've heard rumors about this sector. High turnover, strange incident reports. What actually goes on in these woods?" I pulled out the rules, the same yellowed pages Tom had given me a year ago. "Read these," I said. "Memorize them. Your life depends on it." Marcus laughed, the same way Kyle had laughed. "Come on, these read like a creepypasta. You don't actually—" "Kyle Morrison," I interrupted. "He worked here 3 months ago. He thought the rules were jokes too. We found his truck with the door open and his gear neatly folded on the seat. His body is still out there somewhere, or maybe it's nowhere at all. We don't know." The smile faded from Marcus's face. "You're serious?"
David Mills, 23 years ago. Followed a trail that wasn't on the maps to prove it was nothing strange. Disappeared for 2 weeks.
When we found him, the coroner couldn't determine cause of death or how long he'd been dead because his body had been decomposing for months, but he'd only been missing for 14 days. I pulled up incident reports on my computer, showing him the documentation. Patricia Wheeler went hiking for 9 hours, but claimed she'd been lost for 3 weeks. Medical evidence supported 3 weeks of exposure and starvation. Mark and Jennifer Hamilton vanished from their campsite. We found all their belongings arranged in a pattern we can't explain. Marcus sat down slowly, reading through the rules again with different eyes. "What is this place?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," I admitted. "None of us do. But something is here, something old and wrong. The rules keep us alive. Follow them exactly and you'll be okay. Break them?" I trailed off. He looked up at me. "And if I quit right now? Then Tom will find someone else, someone who might not take this seriously until it's too late. At least I can train you properly. I can make sure you understand." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, teach me." Over the next week, I showed Marcus everything. We hiked the trails, and I pointed out the markers for the restricted zones, those small red marks with 3 vertical lines. We practiced radio protocols for each code. I showed him where the flares were stored and how to use them. Most importantly, I taught him how to recognize when something was wrong. The feeling in the air before an anomaly appeared, the way birds would go silent, the subtle changes in temperature and light. "Trust your instincts," I told him. "If something feels off, it probably is. Don't investigate. Don't try to prove you're brave. Just follow the protocols." On his 3rd day, we encountered one of the mysterious lights.
We were doing an evening patrol when we saw it through the trees. A single light bobbing in the distance, moving in a way that looked exactly like someone with a flashlight. "There," Marcus said, pointing. "Should we check it out?" "No. Rule 4, never follow the lights." We watched it from the safety of my truck. The light moved in a slow circle, as if searching for something. Then 2 more lights appeared, and they began moving in that synchronized pattern I'd seen before. "What are they?" Marcus asked, his voice hushed. "We don't know. They might be searching for people who'll follow them. They might be marking territory. Tom thinks they're testing us, seeing if we'll break the rules." The lights moved closer to our truck. I started the engine. "They know we're here," I said. "Time to go." As we drove away, Marcus looked back. "They're following us." "They usually do for a little while. Just don't stop. They can't leave the forest." We made it back to the station without incident, but Marcus was quiet, processing what he'd seen. "I believe you now," he said finally. "I thought maybe it was mass hysteria or something, everyone convincing themselves that normal things were strange. But those lights, that wasn't normal." "No," I agreed. "It wasn't." By the end of the week, I still had my resignation letter, but I also had a decision to make. Marcus was learning fast. He took the rules seriously, asked good questions, and most importantly, he seemed to have the right instincts. When we encountered something odd, he didn't try to rationalize it or investigate. He followed protocol. "You're doing well," I told him on his last training day. "You're going to be okay here." "Are you staying?" he asked. I looked at the resignation letter in my hands, then at the forest outside the station windows. Mount Hollow had taken so much from so many people. It had tried to take me too, but it had also taught me something important. Some places need guardians.
Not heroes who try to solve mysteries or conquer fears, but people who understand the rules and follow them. People who can warn others and keep them safe. "Yeah," I said, tearing up the letter, "I'm staying." Tom smiled when I told him, "Good, we need experienced rangers like you." "Why do you stay?" I asked him. "You've been here almost 30 years. You've seen all of this, lost friends. Why not leave?" He looked out at the forest, his expression unreadable. "Because if people like us don't stay, who will? We can't stop what's out there. We can't explain it or control it, but we can try to minimize the damage. Every visitor we guide away from danger, every new ranger we train to follow the rules, that's a life saved." He was right. I thought about the visitors I'd redirected, the trails I'd closed, the warnings I'd given. How many people had I kept safe without them ever knowing they were in danger? Now it's been 3 years since my first day at Mount Hollow. Marcus is still here too, training our newest ranger. The incidents continue. Trails that appear and disappear, lights in the forest, strange sounds, and occasional disappearances. We document everything, follow the protocols, and try to keep people safe. I've added 2 wheels to the list based on my own experiences. Rule 16. If you break one of these rules, don't panic. Follow extraction protocols immediately and report to a senior ranger. Sometimes the consequences can be mitigated if you act quickly enough. Rule 17. The forest remembers. If you encounter something strange once, you're more likely to encounter it again. Stay alert, stay vigilant, and never assume you're safe just because you followed the rules before. Last month, we had another incident. A couple camping in the southern sector reported seeing a tall figure watching their tent at night. When I interviewed them, they described it perfectly. Too tall, wrong proportions, movements that didn't look human. I gave them the standard response about wildlife and shadows, but I also strongly encouraged them to pack up and leave. They took my advice. The next morning, I found their campsite. They'd left in a hurry, leaving behind some gear. In the center of where their tent had been was a single footprint, if you could call it that. It was elongated and narrow, nearly 2 feet long, with the impression of too many toes. I photographed it, filed a Code Orange report, and closed that section of the forest for a week. The official reason was bear activity. The truth is something we can never put in a public report. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if we told everyone the truth. If we published the rules, explained the dangers, admitted that something unexplainable exists in Mount Hollow National Forest. But I know what would happen. Some people would avoid the park, yes, but others would come specifically to experience the strange. They'd break the rules intentionally, trying to prove they're braver or smarter than everyone else. More people would die. So we keep the secrets. We follow the protocols. We save who we can. If you're reading this, please understand. I'm not writing this to scare you or entertain you. I'm writing it because you deserve to know the truth before you visit Mount Hollow or any other remote wilderness area. Not all forests are the same. Some of them are older than human civilization, and they follow rules we don't understand. Respect them. Listen to the rangers, even when their instructions seem strange. And if you see something that doesn't make sense, a trail that shouldn't be there, lights moving in the darkness, or figures that don't look quite human, don't investigate. Leave immediately. Your life might depend on it. I'm still at Mount Hollow. I still do my patrols, train new rangers, and follow the rules that keep us alive. I've seen things I can't explain and lost colleagues I cared about. But I'm still here because someone has to be. The forest isn't going away. The strange phenomena aren't stopping. If anything, they're becoming more frequent, more aggressive. We're documenting everything, trying to find patterns, hoping that someday we'll understand enough to do more than just survive. Until then, we keep watch, we follow the rules, and we hope it's enough. If you're planning to visit Mount Hollow National Forest, please be careful. Stick to marked trails. Don't hike alone. Carry emergency supplies. And if a ranger gives you instructions that seem odd or overly cautious, follow them anyway. We're not trying to ruin your vacation. We're trying to keep you alive. Last week, another trail appeared, the 7th this year. We closed it off, documented it, and waited for it to disappear. It was gone in 2 days, but something new happened this time. We found a note attached to one of the closure signs. It was written in handwriting none of us recognized, on paper that looked old and weathered despite the trail only being there for 48 hours. The note said, "They're waking up. The old rules might not be enough anymore. You'll need new ones." It wasn't signed. Tom has that note in his office now, sealed in an evidence bag. We don't know who wrote it or what it means, but we're watching more carefully than ever, documenting every anomaly, every strange occurrence. Because if the rules that have kept us safe for decades aren't enough anymore, we need to figure out what will be. And we need to do it before we lose anyone else. I don't know what's coming. I don't know if we can prepare for it. But I know this: I'm not giving up, and I'm not running away. Mount Hollow National Forest needs its guardians.
And I'm going to keep standing watch, following the rules and protecting people for as long as I can, even if it kills me. Because that's what Rangers do. We serve and protect, even when the danger can't be explained, even when nobody believes us, even when the forest itself is the enemy. Stay safe out there, follow the rules, and remember, if something feels wrong in the wilderness, it probably is. Trust that instinct. It might save your life.